Welcome back, New World Fantasy Football, episode 11. I'm pretty sure, if I can count. And we're welcoming a new guest, Kyle Subic, a.k.a. Subu. And go ahead and introduce yourself, Kyle.
What's up, fella? What an honor it is to be here. My name's Kyle Subic, aka Subu, for those of you that really know me. I live in Jacksonville, Florida, grew up in Oviedo with these amazing gentlemen. We've been a part of the same fantasy football league for, over a decade now, it seems like. I think it actually is. I was the very first commish of our fantasy league. So I'm like the George Washington of the Bra League. Just throwing it out there. I manage a claims organization, Auto Claims, in Jacksonville, Florida. Been doing that for about 6 years now. I just love fantasy football, and I love the Browns. So
that's what I was waiting for. What's his name? What's the elf's name? Brownie?
His name is Brownie.
Brownie the elf.
And thank you. That's why I love you. You knew the name. You did the scouting report. You probably know his 40 time. So that's why
it's very slow. It's very slow.
It's slow, but he's got a good 3-cone speed. So you got to look beyond the
likewise.
Short area speed. Short area.
Exactly. He's twitchy.
Absolutely. He's a slot receiver for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
So tell us where the Browns fandom comes in, Kyle. I mean, I already know, but tell the people.
So I think no one chooses to be a Browns fan, right? It's not like a choice that you make consciously. If you do, something's wrong with you. But I was born a Browns fan. I was born in Columbus, Ohio. My dad was a big Browns fan, Buckeye fan. So, I'm all about the Ohio sports teams. I remember watching the Browns, right? And this is trauma, right? We'll go into that area a little bit. I remember at the age I was old enough to really know what I was watching and really understand what was going on. Those were the Bill Belichick days of the Browns, right? Decent, pretty good, right? We were a solid team. And then, we got moved to Baltimore. So talk about having that happen to you at a very young age and having to even go through that. Obviously we came back. We haven't been good since we've been back. So that's decades of additional trauma. But yeah, my fandom comes from birth. So
yes, that birth is a very traumatizing experience for most people. But it's kind of interesting too, because Paul is kind of a self-proclaimed half Colts fan, and they were also a team that was from Baltimore.
Yeah,
it's kind of funny that you guys are both on with that Baltimore ties to your no longer Baltimore teams.
Yeah, that is interesting. It's also interesting that you say self-proclaimed, because every fan of every team is self-proclaimed a fan of that team. So
that was not good use of the English language, I admit. But yeah,
he's skeptical of your fandom. I think that's the takeaway there.
I know every football city in the U.S. Pass me.
If I survived the Curtis Painter era of Colts football, I have gone through the fire as a fan.
Please don't complain about quarterbacks with the Browns fan on.
I need to show you the jersey? I'll bust out the jersey. Spurs win.
Let me see a Tim Couch jersey. I mean, come on.
Oh my gosh! So I had to leave that one. I still have my Johnny Manziel jersey. If we need to bust it out, I will.
What about Bernie?
Bernie, yeah, didn't get a Bernie jersey. That's a safe jersey. That's the thing. You're a fan of a pretty poor sports team when you have to you have to wear jerseys from decades prior, because you just haven't had that consistent baller in any recent time period. Joe Thomas is really the only exception where it's also acceptable.
I was going to say, everybody wears tackle jerseys out there.
Yeah.
I mean, it is Ohio.
When tackle jerseys are the go-to jersey for your team, that's a problem. Let's be honest. So
yeah, I mean, I would gladly sport an Andrew Thomas jersey. I am wearing Eli Manning though right now. So yeah, to your point. But so let's talk about NFL news. Really, there's not too much to talk about, but we're kind of in a wait and see approach with a lot of these players. So for fantasy purposes, we've got Dalvin Cook, Ezekiel Elliott, and of course DeAndre Hopkins are really the three that are kind of like worth talking about in terms of unsigned players or players to be traded in Dalvin Cook's case. Would you welcome Ezekiel Elliott on the Browns?
I mean, if you sign a guy like him, you welcome him. I mean, I also have a soft spot for him because he's a former Buckeye.
Right.
He's been all around just a great dude. For Ohio State purposes, Ohio fan purposes. I don't want a veteran aged running back in that room, right? Like at this point, like we got Nick Chubb, right? If you're gonna have a roster spot available for somebody else to back him up, like a Kareem Hunt like was in years past, like you're gonna give those reps to a younger guy who may end up, being his successor. So I like Zeke. I think he'd be a good fit somewhere else, maybe a more, a room where maybe there's a younger guy that has that starting spot, but I don't think he would be a good fit for the Browns.
I understand that. But then let me say DeAndre Hopkins has been linked to the Browns. So tell me how you'd feel about that, since we're going to be going into this preview of the AFC North teams, and we will start with the Browns. So we're kind of segueing into it, as you can see.
He is the betting fave as of today, and maybe by the time this airs, right, he is on the Browns. We'll see. But he is the betting favorite to land on the Browns. To put that into perspective, 2 weeks ago, he wasn't even in the top 10 in terms of landing spots. So there's some smoke out there. DeAndre Hopkins and Deshaun Watson obviously had a great connection at the Texans, and, bringing somebody like that onto your team when they're bought in on the roster, the quarterback, where that team is headed, I think you pull that trigger, right? Like it seems like a win-win for everybody. That room is pretty crowded, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I mean, you don't tell someone like DeAndre Hopkins, like, hey, you know what? We don't need you. We don't want you. That's a losing franchise mentality, right? So,
completely agree. I would welcome him on the Giants. And then, Paul, where would you say best landing spot for fantasy purposes would be for D-Hop?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Browns would be fine, and I'm curious as we get into it, Kyle, like what you think that does to the actual receiving pecking order. But look, I feel like this is really low hanging fruit to say, and not amazing analysis, because there's nothing really behind it other than the fact that it just seems like that's where a good receiver should go. I would say Kansas City, if they can figure their cap shit out, finds a way to get a veteran receiver with a mature route tree on their team, would be really helpful. Obviously, I think there are hurdles to that happening, like Kansas City just not really caring who Patrick Mahomes seems to throw to. Yeah, I mean, I think that would cause the most buzz, I think, for fantasy drafts. I don't know if that would necessarily be the best football landing spot for them, but I think people would lose their freaking minds.
I think in fantasy land, everybody is kind of like begging Pat Mahomes to give them a receiver worth drafting high. And, the reports that I love seeing, Kadarius Toney, my man, number one, wide receiver potential, the man I can't quit. He's just like an ex-girlfriend that, keeps drunk texting me, and I'm like, oh, what should I do? And I can't go back. But, yeah, I don't know. Obviously, Kelsey's the number one there. D-Hop would be fantastic. I mean, any defense that has to plan for Mahomes, Kelsey, and DeAndre Hopkins at the same time is going to be shitting their pants. I would not want to be the defense coordinator being like, I'd pretty much that week, I'd be like, I'm not coming in. Good luck. See ya. I'm on vacation. Like, what can you do?
I think the thing for the Chiefs, it's like, you just won a Super Bowl, right, without him. So do you need, like, because the question about D-Hop isn't about his talent. It's about, like, is he good for a culture? And is he gonna go all in, right? Is he gonna practice? Is he gonna tarnish the punch bowl, so to speak? Like, so for the Chiefs, it's like, I think the talent is undeniable, but do you risk that, right, with a guy like D-Hop?
Yeah. Do you want a big voice in the locker room? And yeah, that's something they got to figure out. Paul, you got something to say?
Yeah, I mean that's interesting, Kyle. What specifically are you like pointing to there with DeAndre? Like, not to say I ever followed this man on social media or really know anything about what he is like off the field, but where does that come from?
I think there are reports out there, and you can Google it, but he just doesn't practice, right? He doesn't have that, like, I'm going to work my ass off mentality. That, maybe a team like the Chiefs is looking for somebody like that, right? They don't want to sign this receiver for $8-10 million only for him to set a bad example for that, that wide receiver group is very young, right? And like, you need like leaders, you need lead by examples guys. I think, Juju being there was, he brings a lot of good things to that locker room. So I don't know. I think it goes beyond the talent and the production with a team like the Chiefs. But when you win as much as you do, like, you can make those kind of decisions, right? Whereas like the Browns, like, you're not there. Like, you gotta load your roster with talent.
Yeah,
for sure. And then the other unknown is Dalvin Cook, but I don't even want to get into that because who knows? Is he going to get cut? Is he going to get traded?
yeah. I mean, he's still on the Vikings as of today.
He
so
might,
it's really hard to speculate.
he might be a Viking next year, and then all the Alex Madison hype is just like same, whatever. But we're going to get into these AFC previews. We're going to start with the Browns because we're going to do it by, sorry to say this, but worst to first, and their record what were they? 7 wins, 8 wins last year, Browns?
Yeah. I erase it from my memory. Like, every year is like a new, just Men in Black.
Will Smith comes around, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So,
but
I believe we landed at 7 wins. Yeah.
Yeah. Will Smith doesn't slap you in the face. He just neuralizes you, and you're good. But
that's the perfect football mentality in my mind, because I noticed this.
Unless you win the Super Bowl.
Culture, right. Well, no, I think it's football culture in general. This is the season every year, this like 2-month, 3-month window where at least 25 fan bases are saying, I don't care, Super Bowl this year, with the most irrational confidence like in history, and then week 1 happens.
Right. And then you start 0-1, and it's like, we might as well just get the first pick overall. Like, what's the point of even going on?
Prisoners of the moment. So bad.
Oh, absolutely. It's overreaction. That's the overreaction week of the year. So the Browns, I would like to start from a fantasy perspective. Who is their best player for fantasy? I think we all know. That would be Nicholas Chubb.
Yeah, Nicholas Chubb. I mean, he's been, he's been the guy for years, right? And he's so reliable. Like, for as much as the Browns have changed and had different head coaches and, just kind of gone through this period of being optimistic, only to have like everything just shatter. Nick Chubb is the guy. Like, he's talented. He's going to get carries. He's reliable in the red zone. He's going to get touchdowns. Pundits are going to say, oh, but he doesn't get a lot of catches and he's not like a good receiving back. And, at the end of the day, like, you're overthinking it. Like, okay, maybe he gets 2 or 3 catches a game, but like, he's also going to get, he's a guarantee to get 60 yards in a tutty almost every single game. And that's on the low end. So yeah, Nick Chubb is the guy. I mean, if you're looking for somebody on the Browns to hang your hat on.
Right. And it's I
was guilty of that last year. I was definitely guilty of sleeping on Nick Chubb and the Browns, because I think I was right in thinking that they wouldn't be a very good team with Deshaun Watson rusty as hell coming back. But I also underestimated 2 most important factors, which is volume and talent. And he did have those. So that was a mistake on my part.
And that O-line is, they've invested in the O-line. I think the Browns have the most money tied into that offensive line than any other team in the NFL. And, it doesn't – honestly, Nick Chubb's great, but, like, they want to run the ball, and they want to run the ball effectively.
And that's kind of what I'm thinking too is, first off, I want to say nobody has that complaint with Derrick Henry, because we've seen Derrick Henry just rip off giant touchdown run week after week for so many years. But where do you put him in terms of slotting? Like, are you drafting? I'm going to ask Paul because I know you're a little biased. I know you do your best not to be. You're a very good football fan, Kyle. But it's hard not to be. Trust me. We all know this. Are you taking?
I
Who are
think
you
he's
taking?
less biased than you are.
I think so. I admit my homerism a lot. But are you taking, Paul, if I gave you a group of, let's say, Travis Etienne, Josh Jacobs, and Nick Chubb, who are you taking out of those?
I'm taking Chubb. I'm taking Chubb in that scenario. Obviously, like, I think that the spirit behind your question, if I'm reading between the lines, is these other running backs are younger, and it's so funny we talk about younger with a dude that's like 25 or some shit, whatever Nick Chubb is.
I don't care about his age right now.
Guys that are younger and project to be more of pass catching threats, like, I understand all that, but give me who I truly believe is like a top 3-ish pure running back talent in the NFL on a team that should, in theory, have a better offense next year and has shown to be much more durable than his counterparts in that draft range. So, yeah, I'll take him for those reasons. Kyle?
Yeah, I mean, homerism aside, I think Chubb is the answer. You got, keep in mind, in the last couple of years, like, the Kareem Hunt cloud has been following him, which has made him less desirable during draft season. But then inevitably he ends up a top 5 back, right? So now Kareem Hunt is out of the equation. To Paul's point, you're going to have a better offense around him. Last year, Jacoby Brissett was the quarterback, and teams, they loaded the box, right? Like, they were going to let Jacoby beat you. So I think the needle is up for Chubb. His upside is capped compared to the top tier guys because of the receiving, and they load manage him, which is why he's been so reliable. Like, they don't want him to get more than 20 carries a game. That's how they operate. But he's going to get more quality touches this year compared to years past because of the evolution of that offense.
That's all. Yeah, that's all good points. I think for me, I am right there with Nick Chubb. I don't know. It's like if Nick Chubb is 5, then I've got Josh Jacobs either at like 4.5 or 5.5. Like, it's right there. Josh Jacobs. I think I'd put ETN on the bottom there. But yeah, I mean, he's obviously a great pick in fantasy drafts. As long as you're not drafting him number 1 overall, you're gonna do fine. But I want to move into the passing game. I think that's a lot more of a question mark with the Browns, just in terms of how's Watson gonna perform this year, and based on that, who's going to be the beneficiaries? Because they've got D-Hop aside, they have some weapons over there that can be useful for fantasy. So let's go with the expert Browns fan.
I mean, listen, you're either one of two camps, right? You're either in camp A, where you think Watson is going to be what he was 3 years ago, right, with the Texans, where he was a top 5 quarterback. Or you're in camp B, where you think he is never going to be that guy again. And if that's the reality, everything about the Browns is completely shot. So I'm in the camp that Deshaun is going to be a top 5 quarterback again. And here's why. Number one, the dude's still young. I mean, he's young as hell, right? I think he's like just turning 27. So he's in the prime of his career. Number two, the Browns last year, because people are going to judge him based off of last year, right? Oh, the 6 games, like, he looked like shit, blah, blah, blah. Well, keep in mind, he came into a team that had built their whole playbook, their whole team around Jacoby Brissett, right? Like, they had no other option. So he kind of came in, did the best he could. But this year, like, that whole offense, the whole philosophy, the whole playbook is being built around Deshaun. And he's going to have the opportunity to do what he does best and have a whole offseason and preseason to practice. That's huge as well. So I think he will be better. I think he will be that guy that's going to be reliable. He's going to produce. He's going to make mistakes just like he did with the Texans. But, like, you take that gamble with a guy like him. And I think that offense is positioned to be a very, very fruitful offense for fantasy purposes. And In its current state, Amari Cooper is going to be the big beneficiary. I mean, he's super reliable. Again, not super likable because he's very quiet. He runs nice routes. He's not explosive like the Tyreek Hills are of the world. But you look at his stats, he was a top 13 wide receiver last year with Jacoby Brissett throwing in the ball the majority of the year. I also like Elijah Moore as a sleeper. David Njoku is going to, produce solid tight end numbers. And I think those are the three guys that you really want to target at various points in the draft if you want a piece of the Browns.
Yeah, I would say for the Browns, I'll get to you in just a second, Paul. Based on what you're saying, all I want to say is that if what you were saying comes true, Deshaun Watson may be the best value in a fantasy draft, period. Because he's getting what? I mean, he's not even top 10, maybe even top 12 right now, based off like the whole industry, ADPs, they have it right now. I think they have Watson at like 14, 15, somewhere in that range. If he jumps up to like on the same level as Justin Herbert and you got him in the 11th, 12th round, that might be one of the biggest deals of the draft. But Paul, I kind of saw you were about to say something, so my apologies. You go ahead.
No, that's a really good point. And that's kind of where I was trying to go in my question is like, okay, so it sounds like, yes, everything should be looking up. I think even from an outsider perspective looking in, it seems like this team should be better. I do think the Elijah Moore trade was sneaky, one of the biggest trades of the offseason. Because he flashed so much talent. I don't know what was going on in New York.
The Jets.
Why do I want to say Jersey?
You can say weird. Jersey. It's fine.
It was a forgetful stay in that part of the country.
Yeah,
he had one good game, and it's when Miro decided to randomly start him against me.
I think he had more than one good game, but
the one good game that mattered to me.
Yes, it should be a better offense. So I will ask you this, Kyle. Obviously, anything can happen. Huge range of outcomes because of Deshaun Watson's potential to get back to who he was. So if Cleveland wins the AFC North, it is because why?
Well, it's because Deshaun Watson balled out. I mean, that is like I've never seen such a simple scenario for a team. Like either Deshaun plays well and the Browns are potentially winning that division. It's a tough division, but I think that's an outcome. Or he doesn't play well, and guess what? We might be doing this next year, talking about the Browns first again, right? So both outcomes are possible. So that's what makes the NFL fun. So
totally, yeah, definitely agree. I would say a big part of what can make them win that whole division is things going wrong for other teams. Like, yes, Deshaun has to play well. The Browns defense has to hold up, but I think they have a pretty solid defense. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure they do.
They have Jim Schwartz as their defensive coordinator now, which for those of you that know D coordinators, he was with the Eagles when they won their first Super Bowl recently. But yeah, they made some pretty big changes on defense. They have a second Pro Bowler at defensive end to take some pressure off of Myles Garrett. Mm-hmm. So I mean, they're in a good spot there for sure.
Yeah. So I think some things might have to go wrong for Joe Burrow and the Ravens, of course, too. And we'll of course get to those teams, but yeah, I think David Njoku could be a really good value in fantasy drafts as well. We have kind of a unique league where we don't require a tight end, but he's one of those guys that even in our league with, no tight end required, sometimes he can throw him in a good situation in a flex spot and actually get some good points if you're kind of in a pinch. That always seems to happen every year. People are like, let me take the gamble on his random tight end. And now on tight end leagues, he should absolutely be rostered because he has big potential. He just continues to get hurt.
They like him a lot. Like he's that perennial like tight end 11, 12 guy. So like he just kind of, goes on and off rosters. But I do think this year he's set up to be a little more consistent based on the quarterback. Yeah.
I hope so. And I hope that he can stay healthy. I really do. So Paul, you wrap it up, man, when it comes to the Browns. We'll move on to the Steelers after.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm hearing a lot about the range of outcomes from a football perspective. Obviously, Deshaun Watson, right? All that speaks for itself. He's going to be a very polarizing guy in drafts. He's either going to be out of that top 12 or he's going to be potentially in the top 5 because he did have the ability to rush at his peak. But I guess a most relevant question to ask for the fantasy people out here is what should we actually realistically expect from this passing game? Like, are there 2 viable draftable receivers within, the rounds of reason for me? Like, obviously there's super deep drafts out there, but, on a standard 12-team league, should all 3 be drafted?
Yeah, it's a great question.
What can we expect?
So I think the Browns want to throw the ball. They have been building to this season to open up that offense, and they are going to do that and live with the outcome. So you're going to get a lot of volume. You're going to get a lot of high-scoring games, in my opinion. That division is stacked, right? So there's going to be offense. And I think Amari Cooper is the guy that you can really depend on. And then beyond that, like Donovan Peoples-Jones, Elijah Moore, Tillman, a guy they just drafted from Tennessee. Like, there's a possibility that all of those guys could produce. It's just going to be hard to know what week they're going to produce, right? And that's I wouldn't reliably start any of those guys, to be honest. But you want to roster them and see what happens for sure.
Yeah, I think a lot of those guys, besides Cooper, are kind of your long shot DFS type plays or your flex fill-in guys. But I will say this, last thing about the Browns is for those big 3, I'm not even talking about Chubb, just Watson, Cooper, and Njoku, I expect all of them to outperform their ADP, which is what you're looking for in fantasy. If you do that consistently, you're going to have a good team. So the Pittsburgh Steelers, they to me are kind of similar to the Browns in like, okay, we know who the running back is, and he can be a little frustrating because Najee is not all that like explosive. He's kind of just consistent, steady Eddie. You're going to look up from a game that was underwhelming and be like, oh, well, he got me 15 points. Like that seems to happen a lot with Najee. But their passing game is also one of those things where I think that the Steelers have a good chance of ending last place in the division, but it's going to be razor thin. That's kind of how I see it. Because honestly, I don't think Kenny Pickett is that dude. And with that, take it away, boys.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll start.
Whatever your opinion is on the Steelers. Let's. I should have asked a question.
It's so for me, I'm interested in Pickens. I think that depending on where his ADP ends up being by draft time, I like Pickens a lot. Obviously, the year 2 breakout conversation I think is almost overdone at this point.
Yep.
They did. I mean, Chase Claypool versus Allen Robinson. Like, I feel like that's poop for poop in terms of their trading of receivers there. I do think Deontay Johnson is solid, but I see George ascending to being the number 1 receiver with his rapport with Kenny. So I'm interested in that. Outside of that, in terms of their receiving room, I just think Deontay is going to be who he is, which is high volume with not a lot of touchdowns, some yardage, some catches. I tend to like those receivers, but I also don't love what this passing offense projects to. Yeah, well, no. So what I'm saying is so my Mason-Dixon line for a good passing offense is about 3,500 yards, right?
I gotta ask one question, Paul. Because you say that a lot. What in the fuck is a Mason-Dixon line?
So I'm getting put on the spot here, but I think that it has to do with the Civil War and how they originally divided like the points of demarcation between the North and the South is what I'm pretty sure it is. Something like that.
What's a demarcation?
Kyle's nodding his head.
I think that's. I'm glad you got asked the question because I think I would have been.
Well, he said that like 5 times, and I'm like, I get what you're saying. It's kind of your average. Why don't you just say the Andy Dalton line?
Yeah. Okay. So yes. So the Andy Dalton line, the Red Rocket line,
or now Andy Dalton is now Kirk Cousins. He actually transformed into Kirk Cousins. So there you go. Whatever.
The Kirk effect, but. No, so basically, like if an offense can't get to at least 3,500 yards of total passing, then I really struggle to think that they're going to support 2 strong every week starters in fantasy.
Yeah.
So I think that Pittsburgh is barely going to do that, and I think Pickens is the one to target versus Deontay. That's my personal, very humble outsider opinion. Kyle, I'm not sure what you think about that.
No, I agree. I think the perception is that the Steelers are going to be better than they are in reality because they're the Steelers, and being a franchise like Pittsburgh, you get the benefit of the doubt. But if you take the logo and the name out of it, like, I just don't think the Steelers have a very good offense. Pickett's, he's going to get better, but compared to other quarterbacks in the league, like, you're not, he's below that Andy Dalton line, maybe. I don't know. We'll have to figure that out. The Kirk Cousins, sorry. There you go. He's below that line, right? And then you have, to Paul's point, that now you got 3 wide receivers that realistically could produce, but you just can't feel super confident about either one of them. Like Deontay Johnson, like, great guy, super talented, but he can't catch a touchdown to save his life. And like, I don't think I'm targeting any of those guys. Obviously, if a Pickens falls to you, you're going to take him because I think he's the most talented, best upside. But yeah, that offense is not super sexy.
So I agree with that, and I will say, well, I don't agree actually because we get dirty here. I am still totally fine. I see Deontay and Pickens very close to each other. I brought up Deontay Johnson stats because I'm a scientist. I'm a mathematician. And in his 4 years, he's averaging 10.7 yards a catch, which is like, blah, whatever. Nothing fancy, right? Nothing you're going to write home about. But last year, Homeboy had 147 targets, 82 receptions. Now, Kenny Pickett and throwing to the outside kind of sucks. But with that many even targets, a freaking goose on touchdowns, that is not happening again.
Yeah.
If he gets 5 or 6 touchdowns, I think we're talking about Deontay Johnson in a bit of a better light. Not like, oh, wow, he's a first-round pick, obviously. But I don't see that happening again. I think that it's kind of going to regress to the mean. And you'll be happy with his, 4 or 5 touchdowns. You better be happy with his. So his touchdown totals are 5, 7, and 8, and then 0. That was the outlier. So if you say he gets 6 touchdowns and he puts up 900 yards and 6 touchdowns, what? That makes him a wide receiver 3?
I don't think he's been drafted as a wide receiver 2. That's the problem.
Right.
You think he's being drafted that high?
As a 2.
And I don't think he gets that many targets again. Like I think Allen Robinson and Pickens are going to eat into the targets. I don't think it's winning football to throw 147 balls to Deontay Johnson.
To a glorified Jarvis Landry.
Right, exactly. Like he's not. Yeah, so we'll see what happens there.
He's not a bad player. He's just not like what you want for fantasy. You want the Chris Olaves that are going to be. Oh, my average depth of target is like 18 yards. You know what I mean? So,
Can I ask, what do we think about Najee? Like, is that on the question list?
Yeah. He's frustrating as hell. But I think, if you have him as your RB2, you're like, all right, he's pretty consistent. He'll help.
He was way overdrafted last year.
Yeah, he's been overdrafted as hell. Like, even last year, pat myself on the back. I was very like, I'm staying away from that dude at that ADP. I just was like, no way. Because I just saw how inefficient he was. And I think that the Steelers are going to run him into the ground again, and he's going to be 3.2 yards a carry and end up with 90 yards and a touchdown every week. So, or at least he'll average that.
Is there anyone that you guys can look at on this running back depth chart, the Jalen Warrens of the world, that could threaten Najee's volume? Because that is Najee's value to me.
No.
His value is synonymous with his volume. So
coaches love to say
threats on that roster.
Coaches love to say, we're going to get this guy more carries, the ultimate Antonio Gibson. And then the games actually come and it's like, why do you only get 2 carries? I don't know. Come on.
Here's my theory. I think the Steelers are going to be behind in some games, okay? And I think Jalen Warren's going to get some volume. Like, I think he's the guy that they're going to have in when they're behind. So I think, late round flyer, take a Jalen Warren. You better take him if you take Najee. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I'm looking up their depth chart right now just to see if there's any names that really pop off the page, and I kind of doubt it.
Yeah, I didn't see any.
It's pretty much just Jalen Warren, right? That's like the only. They didn't draft anybody. Any running back that I know of?
Nobody of note. They got a late guy.
Did they?
Day 3 or later? Yeah, I don't remember his name.
Yeah,
Alfonso Graham.
They love Jalen Warren. So, I mean, we'll see if he gets enough carries to be fantasy relevant, but I think he will.
I could see he's worth being stashed in the back of a roster and, like, you praying.
And so we can all agree, right? Like, we think Kenny Pickett will be better, but not better enough to matter for fantasy.
I'm not touching the guy in fantasy. Yes. Is he going to be able to support Pickens enough, Deontay enough to like make them wide receiver 3s? Yeah, I think so. I think that if you're starting Kenny Pickett on a week, you're like, shit. That's the best option I have right now.
It's a bad week.
Yeah.
Like the bye weeks, you have an injured quarterback and your bye weeks are hitting. Like that's when he becomes an option. And if it's like, it looks like a good,
they bum me out.
They're kind of depressing, and I want to go back to that point that Kyle made. That's so true that you said about take away the history and the logo, and they are just like an average. Maybe they get to 500 team. I know the narrative is Tomlin's never been under 500, so maybe that happens again. But he's in the stacked division. The Browns have gotten better. The Ravens have gotten better with their weapons, and Lamar's back. And the Bengals are top class in the division. So, yeah, Steelers, I think you're coming in last place, and I think fantasy is going to be a bit frustrating for those players, for you to have those players in fantasy. But
the Patriots have gotten overrated for the last 2 years because of that logo. They really haven't been a good team. They really haven't even drafted particularly well. So, Bill, you're losing your fastball.
Not wide receivers.
Feel free to clip this to throw it in my face later.
Tyquan Thornton is a long shot this year too. But Ravens, man, they are once again the same old story.
Kyle's
Lamar
favorite
Jackson running the show.
I think the Ravens had such an interesting offseason. Like, look at who they brought in, right? Like, after they were a little late to the party, right? But they ended up bringing in Nelson Aguilar, right? Which is interesting. I think that got lost in the news, but they got that speedster. Obviously, the big news was Lamar Jackson re-signing, but then they bring in a guy like Odell Beckham to that room.
Who's that? Who's Odell? I've never heard of that.
I don't know. I think he played for the Giants at one point, or the Jets, or maybe the new.
That asshole who made that really good catch once, and then everybody overrated. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
That guy. Yeah. I'll have to Google it later, but I think you're right. So they have Rashad Bateman. So I think the Ravens are in an interesting position because they have basically built that roster to appease Lamar. You fire Greg Roman, the offensive coordinator, and you bring in a guy like Todd Monken, who is air raid guy, like wants to gun it downfield. And now you got some firepower on that offense. You got Lamar back. I'm so fat. It's going to be so interesting to see how the Ravens play this year, because I think a lot of people want them to be like, oh, they got the pieces. They're going to be better. They're going to win the division. But it's like, wait a second, like you're redoing that whole offense, and is Lamar going to be a guy that's going to like distribute the ball to all those weapons? You know?
Yeah. Paul has a big opinion on Lamar and running quarterback. So let's hear Paul's opinion on this.
That's fine. It's funny, you know that opinion. I don't even know what opinion that you're referring to, but I do have an opinion on this situation. I think that Ravens have a really wide range of outcomes this year. I think wider than or personally, I think than other people would think. Like, if you are bringing in a Munchin to make an air raid offense there, I don't think that's winning football. I don't think that's that's the answer. Like, I think the Ravens had their ceiling. I truly know that's probably unpopular, but you know, especially when you consider the fact that their quarterback is only 26 or whatever entering this year. But you know, I think that having more weapons is helpful. I think Odell is cooked. I don't really have a lot of confidence in his ability to be a contributor, at least from a fantasy perspective. Obviously, real football, that could be completely different. Rashad Bateman, jury's still out on him. Zay Flowers, rookie, naturally, jury's still going to be out. Mark Andrews is still the number one option in terms of passing there, but that's my feeling. From a fantasy-only perspective, I like the Ravens a lot because I think J.K. Dobbins comes back stronger than ever. He's finally that 2 years removed from the injury that everybody kind of chases, right? And obviously Lamar is always going to be borderline cheat code status for fantasy because of what he can do. But if you're asking me like, hey, all these extra receivers, a focus on the passing game, yes, it's cool. You want to give your quarterback more weapons. We've been waiting for that just to overall make the offense better. But I think if you change what that offense was built on and you change the way that you play, I actually think that would be a mistake.
I'm surprised you say Odell's cooked, because the salary and the contract they gave him would suggest that they're expecting him to be a number one wide receiver. Yeah. So I'm interested to see how that plays out. Like, I personally think Odell is going to be a producer. I think if you take a wide receiver from Baltimore based on their ADP, I think Odell's probably the guy, because what are the options? When Odell's on the team like that, you got to feed him the ball. So I almost feel like Lamar is going to be like seeking him out because that he wanted him, right? Like, he basically recruited him there. So I think it'll be interesting. I don't know what to expect from that room. So
I'm pretty much echoing what you were going to say, Kyle. They gave him $15 million with the incentive up to $18 million a year. You know, that's getting close. That's like low wide receiver one money, you know, from an NFL perspective. And I know I just talked shit about the guy. I mean, the 2 years he was good for the Giants was great. And I don't think he's completely cooked. I do think that he's still going to contribute. And I 100% agree with you, Kyle. He is definitely going to get force-fed. And I'm waiting for those tantrums. I can't wait till he has a game where Todd Munchin, as Paul said, is like, screw this.
He's We're
winning by 2 touchdowns. Let's just run the ball over and over again, and you know, spread it out and let Lamar run it up the middle like 18 times, and we'll be good. But like, I'm looking forward to seeing those tantrums in purple now. And but yeah, I do. I think he's gonna lead the team in targets. Put it that way. Even I do think he's gonna out target Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews is he plays tight end, so you have to upgrade him just because if you need the tight end position, like, he's one of the better tight ends you can draft. Sure. I'm not really, but to be honest, I'm not targeting anybody on this Ravens offense except for if it's the 5th round or some 5th, 4th, whatever. If somehow Lamar Jackson's sitting there for me in the 4th or 5th round, I'd consider taking him, because if you have a quarterback that can break an 80-yard touchdown run on any given play, you want that on your fantasy team. But his weapons are going to be frustrating. That's just the way it goes with Lamar Jackson as QB. He's never going to be this, like, Tom Brady, like, or Aaron Rodgers, like, carving you up with his arm. He's just not. That's just not the way he plays football. So I think to expect much more from the weapons around him in fantasy is like, it's just asking too much. Like, I think that as a fantasy community, we have this great imagination, and we want to imagine this Lamar to Odell or Lamar to Mark Andrews as this, like, absolute fantastic just boon for your fantasy team. And it hasn't been there in his whole career, and I just don't think it's gonna happen. So
yeah,
I will say J.K. Dobbins I think is going to be a good value, and I think Gus Edwards is going to be a pain in the ass worth rostering.
Yep. Agree.
So I just do want to jump back in on something that Bell's last season, where he was productive over at least 13 games, was in 2019 for the Browns.
Is that you said Odell?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where he was productive and he played at least enough of a season to matter. So I and this is a point of disagreement, I guess. I don't have a lot of confidence in Odell. I think his gravity and his presence helps the offense. I'm not saying that he doesn't help the offense from a real football standpoint, but in terms of Odell as a fantasy asset, I sold my stock on Odell in 2020, and I'm not buying back in. I won't do it.
I just think, like, because we have to live in this world where we expect him to be healthy and active. I just think if he is, like, he's going to be a target hog on that offense. So, I mean, I agree. Like, do I think he's going to be healthy the whole season? I doubt it. I wouldn't bet money on it. But, I mean, what are they going to do? Give Rashad Bateman and Zay Flowers more targets than Odell and expect that offense to be happy? I doubt it.
No, just Mark Andrews.
Just Mark Andrews.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's pretty much going to be Zay running 9 routes the whole season. And he might, he might hit on, a mixture of 9 routes and bubble screens. Let's put it that way.
People are going to hate that. Dude, he got drafted in the first round, and people are like, oh, this guy is going to be such a big weapon for Lamar. And, like, I'm like, really? The dude's coming from Boston College to the NFL with Lamar Jackson throwing him the ball. Like, it's not going to happen overnight. Like, I just don't see that. So
it's optimism season, though, Kyle. You know that.
So then let's quantify this, right? So
yeah, let's do it.
Where then do you draft Odell if he's the receiver to have in this room?
I think he's going to be like 5th, 6th round kind of pick.
Yeah.
Where you don't want to take him as your 2, but if you get him as your 3 in the 5th or 6th, you're like, this could work. I agree with Kyle. I think he's gonna take a lot of targets, even if they're not really that warranted. I think he's gonna get a big piece of that pie. Question is, how big is the pie gonna be in Baltimore? It's hard to know. Usually hasn't been as big as people want it to be.
Yeah, he's a flex guy. I mean, you're right. Like, you draft him, like, I would even say 5th is a little high for him. I think all of these wide receivers, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're kind of being drafted in that same area. I think Bateman and Odell are like kind of like, okay, I can take either one. Like, I don't want them. I don't want to start either one of them week 1. Like, I'll put it.
I think perceived name value will float Odell's draft stock to a place where I just won't feel comfy.
Yeah.
Where's JK go?
Like 3rd round. I'm pulling up Fantasy Pros right now, just to see
I think I'd take him there. I've always liked JK, but I stayed away last year because of the injury and just how ugly that was. But I'm hoping that he's going to be actually healthy this year.
They have
he's
JK.
the guy. Yeah.
Go ahead. They have J.K. Sorry, as the RB15 and a tier 3 running back. So that's just what the consensus of the fantasy world says. So
he's a guy. If you go like wide receiver in the first 2 rounds, like you're probably happy to get a JK on your team as your RB1 or RB2 if that's your strategy. I agree. I think JK is probably the best option on that team besides Lamar, who's a cheat code. So you're going to draft him high.
Yep. I think we're in agreement on the points that we're in agreement on, and in disagreement on the points that we can't.
You hate Odell. I'm going to tweet at OBJ on Instagram. Paul Keeper thinks you're washed. So.
Well, they have him as low as wide receiver 60. That's Odell Beckham. They have him one spot below Zay Jones. That doesn't really matter too much, one spot. They have him below Adam Thielen and DJ Chark. Like, that's too low for me.
I don't understand that. Like, and I haven't done a lot of research on the fantasy perspective of Odell, but like, I just don't understand the logic. Like, you're not paying Odell to be a wide receiver 60.
No.
Yeah, no, but you have to bake in the risk of his injuries. You have to bake that in.
Sure, I guess that's probably part of it. But if we're like Kyle's saying, if we're talking about assumed health, which that's just how we have to stat it out, right? Even though it's never going to be the case for 100 players. But like, yeah, like assuming health, he's above wide receiver 60.
Yeah,
for sure. So
this and then the Ravens is going to feel like a big steamy Duke right on Odell's chest. If you know, you know.
Oh, I know. I actually know who took that poop, but I can't talk about it on air.
Oh. Well, you have to pay for the subscription service to get that.
I will follow up on that because that sounds fascinating.
My fantasy team name will be based around the who pooped the Odell. So yeah, everybody. Speaking of poop, the Cincinnati Boneholes, as I like to call them. I think I think we already know how good that team is.
They're pretty freaking good.
So the biggest question mark is their running back spot. What's happening with Big Joe Mixon? Samaje Perine is no longer there. Who do they have behind him now? Chris Evans?
Chase Brown, baby.
Chase Brown. Yeah, Chase Brown.
Illinois.
And Chris Evans is still there. Right?
Do we feel good about Chase Brown? I mean,
I liked him when he was getting drafted.
Like, how do you feel like he projects in terms of a running back prospect? He kind of seemed like a
dude. He was the guy
was to me.
He was a beast in college. On like what was objectively like not the best Illinois team. He was like one of the best running backs in the NCAA. The knock on him, like talent-wise, he's good, but the knock on him is his age, and I think he's pretty old for a running back, and he has a lot of mileage on him. I mean, they used him a lot at Illinois, so I think the Bengals. I mean, he got drafted in like the 6th round, which reflected that. But I think I think he could potentially end up taking a lot of carries away from Joe Mixon. I do think the Bengals want to move away from Joe, and we'll see. So,
yeah, he's always been kind of a curious case, Joe Mixon, of like great talent, great prospect. Obviously, physically, he is pretty much a prototype kind of guy. But just, I don't know, for some reason, it's like, I hate to say this because as a Giants fan, similar to Saquon Barkley, where it's like, I know Saquon was a better prospect coming out, but it's like, okay, he's got everything except he's just not really that good at playing running back, And that's kind of what I see with Joe Mixon. He's just like, these like average dudes who just know how to get through a hole or like produce more.
He was bad. Like he was playing poorly. We had that trade last year where I kind of dumped him, and
I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah,
terrible trade for me.
I don't want to talk about that either. motherfucker put 6 touchdowns on me.
Oh yeah,
he eliminated my ass.
That
one
game. You're like, oh man, this guy, like, that hurt me a little bit, but yeah, he's not an efficient running back, like, so that's why I think I think they know that, and I think they want to move away from him. Samaje Perine was more efficient than he was last year.
He was. And like, that's also why I know this is a whole different subject, and sorry, talking about it, Giants, but I don't think Joe Shane wants to really give Saquon that bag, because he's like, yeah, I mean, he's a great prospect. I didn't draft him, and he's just not that good at playing running back. He's a fantastic athlete.
Nobody wants to pay running backs their second contract.
No,
I don't think that's any fault of the running back itself. That's just nobody wants to do it. We'll just draft whoever.
Yeah,
unless you're like a Christian McCaffrey,
Right. Yeah. If you're so multifaceted that it's like, damn, this guy is such a plus on the field. I don't know. Anyways, Joe Mixon. Yeah. Joe Mixon, and it's like, is he even going to be on the Bengals? I think so. I don't think they're going to really be able to do anything with him. He's kind of stuck there. I think he's got a big contract too. So they're like, shit, we're stuck with him for one more year. But he might, that might mean like, screw it. Like, we don't care about his future health. So just give him 100 carries a game.
Inefficient carries too.
Yeah. Right. So it's like, and that was the thing too about the Bengals, that, well, being a eventual Joe Mixon manager, not owner, manager, the PC way to say it.
Good.
Is
Good. We won't cancel you.
Oh man, damn it. Yeah. I really want to get canceled. I quit this shit. But like, even when they were winning in these games, it's still like, I don't care. I'm going to throw the ball. I'm like, can Joe Mixon just please just be able to run this game and, like, you know what I mean? Just turn the clock. But they're like, we're better off just throwing a dink and dunk out to Chase or to T, because Joe Mixon sucks. He's just gonna run us into a crappy, like, 3rd and 6 that we don't want to deal with.
Hey, playing against them, I was always very happy when Joe Mixon got the ball, right? Because I felt like that was the best outcome. You don't want Joey B throwing the ball, and Joe's not going to – I mean, he's going to get 2 yards most of the time, right? We'll take that.
Right. It's not really getting your offense going in the right direction. It's like, oh, crap. It's kind of a wasted play. And I felt like Joe Mixon he's just littered with that. And I think he got – I can't tell you the numbers off the top of my head, but his conversion rate within the 5-yard line was so bad. Like, you can blame that on the O-line, I guess. But holy crap, man. Like, he got so many carries inside the 5 and, like, barely ever converted. He converted from the 1. But, like, besides that, he's, like, getting stuffed.
Okay.
What tier is he in? What tier is he in?
I'll find that.
So quick timeout on the Joe Mixon thing, because I think we're all in agreement that Joe Mixon is a career 4.0 flat, kind of average plotting runner. But knowing what is behind him, knowing how good this Cincinnati offense is, and understanding they just made a big investment in Orlando Brown for that line, like, I mean, like, what is Joe Mixon's floor? If he doesn't have much of a ceiling, I gotta feel like his floor is pretty decently safe. No,
I think if he is just like basic mathematics here, if he is the primary running back for a good offense, he's going to be okay. He's going to be good enough to be your RB2. If your team is constructed that way, he'll be fine. He's just not someone you're, like, excited to pick, in my opinion. And there's a good chance that he gets usurped.
I think his floor is low. I think, Paul, I do think that I think the Bengals want to move on from Joe Mixon. They see the same shit we see, right? They're not a bunch of, like, idiots with their heads in the sand, which is why they drafted Chase Brown, because he can come in and immediately take carries away from Joe, because he's a workhorse guy. So I think the floor is very low. I would stay away from Joe Mixon, or if you do draft him, I think you need to, like, pony up and also take Chase Brown a little higher than his ADP to protect yourself.
I agree with that completely. And then there's the passing game. So the Bengals obviously have
the passing game is good. End of analysis.
Pretty much.
I hate them. I hate them because I ain't them, right? Like, I think they have the passing game that is the envy of the NFL at this point, and they've committed to those guys, and they're all like happy in their roles. I mean, take your pick, right?
How excited are we about white boy Charlie Jones?
Dude, that guy was like I told you all the game, I'm an Ohio State fan. I'm a Big Ten guy. I pay attention to those teams, which is why I'm high on Chase Brown. Charlie Jones is another guy. Like, dude, that guy is like, he's
Cooper
a baller.
Cup level. He's dude.
He could be like, he is that, like, he could be that guy. Like, I would argue that he was maybe better or just as good in college as Cooper was. Like, don't quote me on that. I haven't watched any film, but he has similar traits. But this year, is he gonna like be fantasy relevant? I don't know.
So the question about that, now this is kind of getting off topic, but we're already here, so let's just talk about it. Next year, do the Bengals pay T. Higgins, and do they keep Tyler Boyd? And if the answer is no to those, then how high are we talking about taking somebody like Charlie Jones? If he shows promise, he has to show something. But that's an interesting question. I know we can't answer it now.
In at least the T. Higgins range, right? Like, if they don't really add much else to the receiver room, like, we know the passing game will be good. So you got to figure at least 1,000 yards is up for grabs, right? You know, in terms of that. But I don't think they would let both of those receivers go. I think they would retain one.
Depend on their cap situation, how much Joe Burrow's getting paid, and did he get he didn't get a second contract yet, did he, Joe Burrow?
I don't think
they're working on it.
Right.
They're working on it.
So yeah, that's going to be a big factor. Obviously, he's going to get paid an ass ton, and and then the rule of the NFL is like there has to be at least one really good wide receiver. So is he that guy? I don't know. I mean, there's like every 5 years, there's like a new wide receiver that gets to be like, oh, that's the best wide receiver in the NFL right now. And it was Edelman.
Cup's gonna need to hold that crown for at least one more year.
Obviously it's Cup right now, and then maybe it's Charlie Jones. We'll see.
Yeah,
but Jamar Chase, you don't have to say anything right now, Kyle, because I know that's not right. But he may be your keeper. I would be willing to bet you do keep him. Is there a world where he is the number one wide receiver next year? I mean, becomes the number one. I know he's not going to get drafted above Justin Jefferson, but some people even might. I don't know.
Yeah, I think absolutely. Like, I think you can make that case. I think, Justin Jefferson is extremely safe. But yeah, Jamar Chase, like, if he played a whole year, like the whole season last year, like, he could have potentially have been the number one wide receiver in the league. So, I mean, listen, I think he's going number 3 in fantasy drafts right now. That reflects the value that he has. And I think he's definitely, in the discussion to be the number 1 overall wide receiver.
So you still have Cooper Kupp ahead of him right now.
So I think he's ahead. I think it's, my top 3 in the draft are Christian McCaffrey, Justin Jefferson, and then Jamar Chase. So
I'm talking about wide receivers. Sorry, only wide receivers. You have him at.
No, I think he's ahead of Cooper Kupp.
Yeah,
I
agree.
What do you think, Paul?
So obviously, dude, I'm not going to be the anti-Jamar Chase guy. He's incredible. He's obviously in that top tier of talents. A combination of talents and situations in Cincinnati as well. So he's awesome. I don't really see a world where he supplants Justin Jeff as the number 1 receiver in football, because his profile statistically a little more high variance than those other two. And T. Higgins does take a lot of catches, does take a lot of attention. So, Andrew, this is just a random example that came up to my mind. when I started playing fantasy football, you'd been playing for a few years already. And one of the pieces of advice that always stuck with me that you gave me as an example was the Marvin Harrison versus Reggie Wayne conversation, right? Mm-hmm. At the end of the year, stats would be almost identical, truthfully speaking. But everybody always grabbed Marvin because he had the big highlights. He was the super traits guy. He was faster than everybody else, and he got the bomb touchdowns. But there was a little bit of like up and down to his game. So what I always thought in my head is like, man, like if I know this passing offense is going to be awesome, what's more valuable to me? A first round pick for Jamar Chase or a third-ish, maybe fourth round pick for T. Higgins? And then at the end of the year, I feel like the value that I got was almost as good. So, that's kind of more my philosophy with that. But, I mean, this is not anti-Jamar Chase because he's incredible and he will have a better season when everything's said and done. And he's also a fucking terrifying player to see on the other side of a matchup because he instills that different kind of fear that no matter what my team does, my matchup could be over on any given throw.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that, and that's true in a lot of ways. I think the thing about Jamar Chase is just you pretty much already said it in there. T. Higgins, most likely, I mean, you have those crazy anomaly weeks from any player, right? But he's not really going to win you a matchup most of the times. And that's the difference between a first-round pick and a third-round pick to me, is you want to get those guys who any week can absolutely win you the matchup. Jamar Chase has 203 in him any given week, where T. Higgins does not. That's really my only argument for that.
Well, Paul, you hate OBJ. You hate Jamar Chase. So,
Alec Pierce, bro. Alec Pierce to the moon. Alec Pierce, other contender for the white receiver, by the way.
Hey, before we wrap
all I'm going to say, and I know I cut across you, Kyle. I apologize, but all I'm going to say is that there was a 9-point fantasy difference between those two players. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah. How many games did Jamar Chase miss?
Well, you have to bake that in too,
but
right?
T. Higgins also missed a few and got knocked out early in a few. It was. I will, before we wrap anything up though, we should talk about Joe Burrow because Joe Burrow is interesting because he's not really going to get you those rushing yards. I mean, he'll maybe 15 to 20 rushing yards on average a week. Not anything you're like, oh, got to take him for his rushing ability. There's a lot of variance in these pocket passers. If they don't get the touchdown, that's the thing about having those pocket passing guys. Like they don't give you the same floor as a lot of these running QBs are able to. And crazy enough, I actually think like the consensus right now, let me look it up really quick. Fantasy Pros has Daniel Jones as number 12. Is that because he's some rock-solid passer? Hell no. It's because they saw the running ability last year. Joe Burrow doesn't really provide that, but he has probably the premier wide receiver core in the whole NFL.
Pretty damn close, yeah.
But there's weeks where they get up to the 2 or 3 or 4 times, and maybe he gets one passing touchdown. And even though their offense scored 35 points, you got one touchdown from your quarterback. Does that scare you guys in terms of drafting him above somebody like maybe a Justin Fields or, I mean, I know he's not going to go above, Daniel Jones is not going to go above him, but somebody like that.
I think
somebody with rushing
Kyle,
ability.
I think you're the best person to speak on this.
So I was pleasantly surprised with Joe Burrow's production last year. And one thing I noticed is that a lot of the surprise came from his rushing. He had 6 rushing touchdowns, I believe, last year, which isn't a lot.
That's because Joe Mixon didn't get in first. Just saying.
Yeah. It is a lot when, right? Like, it's a lot when you consider Joe a pocket passer. So I don't know if that's a trend. I don't know if he's gonna get 8 this year, but I wouldn't bank on that happening again. So I think because of that, you have to like have a dose of reality. I don't think he's in that top tier conversation when you consider the upside with the other, the other running.
Yeah, definitely. Like, would you consider him a tier 2? Like, everybody's like, okay, it's going to be Hurts, Mahomes. Who am I forgetting in that conversation? Oh, Josh Allen. Those are got to be like the top 3, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I think you wait. I don't think you target Joe where he's, is a tier 1 guy. I mean, I think he's tier 2, maybe even tier 3. I don't know. We'll see.
I would say.
Can we agree that Joe is the best of the quote unquote non-dual threats?
I don't really consider. Do you consider Pat Mahomes a dual threat?
Yeah, I do. He has enough in there.
Yeah, he can make a play.
He's just in the alien category.
Yeah, I would say I feel like he's a pocket passer. Well, not even. He's just an improviser, but he moves to throw. He doesn't move to run,
Yeah.
Like his tendency, like Lamar Jackson's tendency is like, oh, if I'm going to run out of this pocket, I'm probably going to run the ball. Same thing with Josh Allen.
Yeah.
He's like, if I'm coming out of this pocket, I'm probably running the ball. Patrick Mahomes is like, nah, let me look downfield. So let's do this experiment real quick. We've just been using Fantasy Pros, so I'm just going to continue using that. Tier 2, according to them, consists of Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields, Justin Herbert, and Trevor Lawrence. Are you taking somebody above Joe Burrow of those names?
I personally, I like I think Joe Burrow's coming off a really, really good year, and I think he's being rated a little bit higher than his stock is high right now. And I would prefer the upside of a Lamar Jackson, even a Trevor Lawrence, based on where they're going in the draft. I think there's a lot of talented quarterbacks out there. But trust me, Joe Burrow is great for consistency purposes, but upside, I would go elsewhere.
For sure.
I agree with Kyle. I have a probably unnatural love of Fields right now in terms of a fantasy prospect. So I might even take Fields above him. It's not like, if we're talking real football, there's not probably 3 or 4 quarterbacks that we could put in front of Joe Burrow, like from that perspective. But just from a fantasy perspective, like a guy, and Kyle, I was surprised to hear he had 6 rushing touchdowns. That's actually a lot.
Yeah.
I would even say that might be hard to replicate just based on trying to project that. But, obviously sneaks and stuff get mixed in there, but you can't rely on it the same way that you can with some of these other guys. So to
Jalen
me,
Hurts.
To me, the quarterback position has changed. What we expect to get out of the quarterback position in terms of points has changed because there are so many guys now that add that rushing ability, right? So, like, I think of Tom Brady, right? Like, his years as a top 5 quarterback, that year, basically, I think he maybe had 2 years actually in Tampa, but let's just say for purposes, 1 single year, he went absolutely bonkers with touchdowns and with passing yards. It's really hard to do that year after year after year to hit that 45 touchdown threshold to where you can compete with those top tier guys. So until the scoring changes dramatically in fantasy football, it's hard to put him above that tier.
It's bananas because like a Justin Fields is undoubtedly a way worse quarterback than Joe Burrow.
Yes, he is.
But I mean, even when comparing their best weeks to each other, you're taking Justin Fields 10 out of 10 times.
Yep.
And yeah, like I will say this about the Bengals. Their offensive line, even with the addition of Orlando Brown, is not great. And I think there is the possibility that Joe Burrow regresses compared to last year because of the offensive line, because I don't think he's going to get the rushing touchdowns. So I would just be careful. Like he may not be a tier 2 guy this year, like he's being drafted.
I'm very much in the camp of Joe Burrow with those other guys mixed in, Lamar Jackson, Fields, Trevor Lawrence, whatever. That to me is a question of roster construction, because it's like, if you feel you have these like high risk, high reward type players that your team, like your first 4 rounds were like loaded with, then okay, maybe you take Joe Burrow and you say, okay, like I need some consistency on this roster already. Or maybe you're going for the stack if you got Jamar Chase.
Mm-hmm.
Some people like doing that just because it's fun. I want that big, 14, 15-point fantasy point play if I can get it.
You have 2 of those people on this call.
That's right. You had the Diggs Allen, and you had the Jamar Burrow. That's right. I was close to being, Desmond Ridder, Kyle Pitts, but I didn't.
That's the anti-stack.
Yeah.
That's a negative point.
Tiny stack. Yeah.
That's like one Lego. It's not even like 2. One Lego. There's my. But yeah, I think that's a roster construction thing. Are you willing to? And it's a roster construction, and it's a risk tolerance kind of question. Like me, I am like a high risk. I don't care. Like I'll take the risk. You've seen me in trades. Like I lost a trade with you last year, but I'm like I'm willing to take the risk. Like screw it. I think Jahan Dotson is not bad. Throw him in there. Like. He just never really got in the field and blah, blah, blah. But anyways, I don't need to justify the trade. You won the trade. It's just because Justin Fields can absolutely have some weeks where you're looking at your team and you're looking at your scores and you're like, dude, Justin Fields got me like 9 points. Like they contained the run on him and he barely was able to like complete a pass. Like there could be weeks like that, where I don't think that you're going to see those weeks from Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
Burrow's going to get you 16, 17 every week at least.
And that happened last year. I think he had one bad week where he was like under 10 points, but every other week, like even his bad weeks, he was still, with the exception of the one, he was at like 15, 16 points.
Every QB has a dud in there. Like it just happens.
Yeah. But I do agree with that. I just think that those weeks, I think, hurt more when you play against the Jalen Hurts owner and their quarterback gets them a damn 40 spot. And you're like, what am I supposed to do about that? You know what I mean?
Yeah. When
like
the
I
weeks
got a normal 15-point game from my quarterback.
Right. That disparity in quarterback points can absolutely be the difference between you getting your ass waxed for a week and, sometimes, you just can't even be in it because that QB just went off on you. And that sucks. But just to wrap up the Bengals, the grand finale, the one that everybody really wants to hear about and a very interesting player that everybody knows and loves, tight end Irv Smith. He is projected to be their starting tight end. Do we care? That's really the question. Do we care?
Kyle.
I think his connection's looking a little rough on my end.
Yeah, I'll say it. Yeah, so I don't, but obviously, like I might be the worst person to ask because I don't really care about a lot of tight ends. I think that there are only 2 tight end tiers. I think there's the tiers of the guys that you want to start, and then there's the tier right, and then there's. Now we can.
We can hear you,
Thank
but
you for interrupting me.
I think that's coming late. That's coming late. We're having some technical issues at the end here. Kyle, just say something because you're not moving on my screen, but I can hear you. I think we're losing Kyle.
I really wanted to hear this hot take that he wanted to jump over me on.
Hear me now?
Kyle, can you leave and come back real quick? Into the
fill in airtime, cheesy.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. What are you saying about Irv Smith?
Pod content.
I know.
Like, to me, the two tight end tiers are simple. It's the tight ends you actually want to start. That's a small tier. And then everybody else in the second tier is guys that you like could be startable, guys that you might feel good about, like guys that have some promise. Irv Smith does have some promise, Big Irv, right? And there's other guys in that tier that are younger tight ends that have shown some flashes, shown some upside, all this stuff. But no, like, I don't have a lot of confidence just because, I mean, there's only one ball to go around, right? Like, I don't see them featuring a tight end in the passing game in a really big way. So that's my feelings on it. Kyle, too, welcome back. Just wanted to kind of point blank this one so you can kind of know where I stood. Like, yes, Irv Smith is interesting because I think he's got talent, but I just don't think that Cincy is going to feature the tight end enough to have top 10 production consistently.
Yeah, I was just so excited to talk about Irv Smith that like my connection couldn't take it. But yeah, I agree. I mean, the fact we're talking about Irv Smith is great, but I just, like I agree. There are a lot better fantasy options out there at the tight end position, and he's fourth on the pecking order, so he'd be a nice bye-week plug-in. So
yeah, it's like he's a hope and a prayer guy, and I just wanted to cover it just so we got those positions of the offense. And I will say, just the whole division, I think we know who the best kicker is because kickers are people too. It's Justin Tucker or nobody else. But like, who is the Browns kicker right now?
Cade York. So drafted very high last year. So yeah. Hey, listen, like I think all the teams in that division outside of the Steelers are going to put up points. So yeah, you'll be good with any of those guys.
Right. So. Yeah, I agree. Dude, I got to get going. I hear the wife stomping upstairs. She's taking care of the baby boy and all that stuff. But Kyle, man, been awesome having you on. You're super knowledgeable and such a devout Browns fan, and that's hard to be. So I'm proud of you. I don't want to be like this guy having two teams, But
it's been a pleasure.
I hedge bets. It's what I do. But I will say that even though I'm not a Browns fan at all, I think me and Kyle have always shared that same energy, and like I've been a Magic fan my whole life. Yeah. So like that same oh man, they tease us once every 10 years, but then it all crumbles and falls apart, and we become a minor league team for the Los Angeles Lakers. But I do understand his pain from that perspective, and so I don't ever want to hear anybody calling me a fair weather fan because I've watched plenty of bad sports in my day.
You're not a fair weather fan. You just split your teams up, and I will say I retain story time, right? I retain a little bit of my Browns fandom because Madden 06 NFL Superstar mode, I was drafted to the Browns, and I was going off with Joe Juravicius and Braylon Edwards. So I still like the Browns.
So that's a tier 2 and a tier 4 guy right there, in 06.
Yeah.
Man. So, Joe Juravicius, wasn't it? He was on the Colts the Bucks. I'm sorry, Bucks for a bit, right?
Yeah. It was more than a cup of coffee. It was beyond a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Can I just say, I appreciate y'all having me. This has been awesome. Been a fan for a while. Like, super happy just to talk shit with y'all. And I gotta say, like, I'm a little disappointed. I was ready for some Deshaun Watson massage jokes, and really didn't happen that much. So, I mean,
I had one. I did have one in the chamber that I was like, it kind of missed the moment for me to take a shot. But I was gonna say like something about the running ability. Well, if he's all nice and massaged and loose, he'll start running the ball again. That was my joke. It doesn't hit right now, but.
It's cool. They'll always be next time, so it's all good.
So and Kyle, like you kind of beat me to it because I was going to send us off with a massage Watson joke, but now it just would feel forced.
Yeah.
So what we're gonna
Part
have
of my
to
plan.
do
Yeah.
is we're gonna have to have you back on, and then the moment organically will come. I promise you. You're not gonna know it. You're not gonna You're not gonna be able to predict it. It's gonna hit you randomly. We're gonna get you back on, and I promise you, I will get my molester joke in.
All right. Deal.
Sounds good, guys.
Happy
Sounds
to be
good.
back. So.
My favorite subject is when we talk about molestation on this channel. So let's keep doing it. Robert Kraft loves this podcast. He's all about it. But all right, guys, it's been good.
Love
Peace
y'all.
out.
This was fun.
Love you guys, and we'll talk again soon. See ya.
Adios.